that I'm just imagining that what you just described, again, is the experience of what happens is the result of when you feel securely attached to yourself and another. You have that depth of experience where I think that you're more comfortable with the unknown, more able to tolerate conflict and ambiguity. And as you always talk about, that's the measure of satisfaction and intimacy, is comfort with anxiety. Because as you say, we're always going to be anxious with the unknown. And so that's something you directed my attention to, is switching the focus to pay attention to how do I relate to my own anxiety in relationship. It's in the way of intimacy with others.
Totally. And directly how I understand that is the paradox of to be human is to simultaneously want to like have a deep drive to realize my own kind of cosmic specialness as a single individual, and at the same time want to merge with everything all at once. Right? Both those things come together.
Yeah.
Those needs are met in one single relationship. And if we're going to get close, it means on some level, both those things are what I want. And so for me to be closer to you and to become, in a certain sense, one with you is analogous with me risking being different than you, right? And taking that risk, which always includes anxiety, excitation, courage, and my understanding of like how we move away from anxiety, which is circling, you could say, is the practice of not moving away from that anxiety or that intensity and actually moving towards it and growing versus like submitting or dissociating or dominating the situation, all the different things that we do to move away from that moment.
Yeah, for sure. So we have those 6 and the 7th, or 7, and then the last 2 are the group experience and community. And some of the people have commented when they've read what I wrote in the first article about, I'm imagining, I think what I'm hearing is they're taking this theory that circling promotes the experience of secure attachment, and they're overlaying the process of psychotherapy on the circling. And some people have suggested, well, what happens if everyone in the circle if no one is securely attached? What happens if the facilitator isn't securely attached? And what I'm suggesting is that doesn't matter. As long as we understand the agreements, and our intention is to keep listening, keep owning our experience, everything else we've talked about. And there's at least one person in the circle who can facilitate and slow things down. We almost always, rarely have we not recovered from having a certain kind of intensity occur. And what I'm noticing is so different from circling and psychotherapy is circling is not group therapy, but it's very therapeutic when you have 5 or 6 people mirroring you to you. So instead of just one person, you can choose which one feels right, or maybe they all do. And often people reflect very different things that all fit in some way. But to me, it creates this holding environment, the way Winnicott would describe the holding environment of the mother and child. And I think that is fundamentally different than group therapy, where it could become more, there can be more confrontation. That's a very important practice fundamentally, but this is just something very different about the way we're relating.
Yeah.
And
the thing, I just would say that the one thing that you said about like, what happens if everyone, including the facilitator, isn't securely attached, like blind leading the blind. Well, it's kind of like, to say that is kind of like saying, what happens if we all get together and meditate and one of us has a thought? Right.
Well, it's a little more complex than that,
well, I think what it does is, partially anyways, it points to like that the underlying presuppositions that are both implicit and explicit in circling is a structure that holds, just like you're talking about. It creates kind of a holding environment, if you will, for something like circling to happen. And so that's what's really cool about, and why it's a practice, right? It's like, there's you could say rules the game, right? And just like any, like, you know, if you change the rules of Monopoly, you'll have a different game. You know, circling has some underlying rules, like owning your own experience, you know,
and so
positive intent, those kinds of things.
yeah.
That's that we don't have to be not nuts in order to, in fact, some of the best circles are where you talked about, like, we always recover, where there's those experiences where people do actually are forthcoming and share dissonance, maybe like really well and responsibly, sometimes not so responsibly, but with the commitment to just continually coming together, getting shared reality, owning our experience, getting each other's worlds, being with what's so, which is really what the practice is the practice of, as I like to say, sitting in the question, how profoundly can we be with what is, right?
Yeah.
And so if you think about just that, like imagine if you're with somebody and you're just taking a walk, right? And you start talking to them, and really where they're coming from is relating to you from the question, how profoundly can I be with what is with you right now? I mean, just imagine that, like how that walk would be, right? Like what kind of conversations could come up? What would that feel like? What kinds of things you may talk about? What kinds of silences you may have? But I think that if we all started to live in a world where that was more of the come from in our relations, in the way that we were relating, rather than communicating in order to get what I want, instead, right? Relating in order, in rather just paying exquisite attention, right? And then sharing what's so with you moment by moment with the intention to relate and to be with what is. I have a feeling relationships will go really, really different and may even be very, very nourishing, much more nourishing.
The process of actually getting to that point is complex. Just if you just put out a list of that as a rule book and people study it on their own, some people can do it, but many can't. And it was something even after studying psychotherapy for 2.5 decades, I still had to practice. The sharing of impact, the revealing of experience on a personal level is very challenging. And so just because people might know and hear the words you just said, you can't substitute the framework for actually doing it. And it just requires experiencing over and over. And what I'm imagining is that circling would be like homeopathy, a homeopathic experience for the secure attachment, because people experience more warmth and connection after, we see it every Monday night after 3 hours. People are, from how they felt in the beginning to the end of the evening, is just consistently remarkably different. And but I'm imagining if you just do that over and over and over and over and over again, then something starts to shift in your nervous system. So that's what I'm suggesting people try.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. And if anything, the experience of circling, I would say, if anything, it can begin to set a precedence for what's possible. And it's like, if you think about it, I've been thinking about this lately, me and my kind of trippy thoughts that I have, but I've been thinking about, like, but before Columbus, found out that the world was round, were people walking around talking about how not round the earth was? Right? Like, were they like having a relationship with like how unround it was? I don't even think they even called it round or not round. It just was. I don't even know if they thought of it as flat. But I bet that once word got out that it went all the way around, I have a feeling once people realized that it was possible to go west and end up back to where you were, that was possible, would set a precedence for what made so many other things possible, and how, when you looked across the ocean, how the horizon looked and what it meant to you. So I think that, like, these deep experiences that people have in circling, if anything, what it does is, I think it sets a precedence for what's possible. And if you set a precedence for what's possible, it changes it's called a change in the horizon, right? Which is what gives meaning, right? So it's like, I just can't emphasize that enough, that even if you just go once, right, and you have that experience, those kinds of experiences do have a big impact. And I think that they're really important.
Yeah, I remember that you said that you used that term the first time we were working together, and you use that over and over, and how my horizon would change. And you are the one that gave me that visual. And I like the way you're still referring to that, because I think it's very profound.
Well,
Yeah.
I will always refer to it until I finally catch it. I mean, I've been running towards it like for years, and I just won't let me catch it.
Well, it's really fun to talk with you, and let's do it again sometime.
Much love. It's so great.
Mm.
Thank you for doing this work.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.